All right. I think this is it. I think we're live. I hope we're live. Hi. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm here hanging out with Frank, my good friend Frank.
Hello.
And what are we going to do today, Frank? I've got
Uh,
plans. I'm a little excited about this. What's happening?
well,
I'm going to read this.
a few weeks ago, you asked on Twitter what should be the next package available as a Spring Boot starter. And some time ago, long time ago, you and a colleague started on the Spring Boot starter for Pi4J.
Yes.
We had some live, we worked on it, and then, things happened and
And here we are.
focus shifted, but here we are back again to it.
I asked. It's my favorite starter,
Yeah.
right? Like I have my defaults, but the ones that I asked about, which ones outside of like the Spring umbrella are your favorites, and this is mine.
Well, and it's mine too because I have the Spring Boot Vaadin application that I use at conferences to demonstrate what you can do with Pi4J. So Pi4J is the Java library to be used on Raspberry Pis to interact with electronic components. And you need to wire everything together. And with the starter, this would be easier. And so I took the opportunity last week, this week, to work a bit on this again, because there were some changes in the last months within Pi4J, because I cannot remember when exactly, but Raspberry Pi 5 was announced last year, I think.
Yeah.
And Raspberry Pi decided to do something special with that board. They added a chip, and that chip is separating the SoC, system on chip, from the GPIOs, these pins where you connect electronic components.
Okay.
And their idea is, which is a good idea, they have now this chip, which also does networking, USB, other stuff, is that they can more easily have new boards in the future, but with the same chip to interact with the peripherals, so that they can evolve faster if new SoCs become available, but they don't need to re-implement everything related to communication with USB, GPIOs, because that will be handled by that chip that they already are designing, they say, for over 10 years. It's called the RP1 because that's the first chip they designed themselves. And in the meantime, they have the what is it called? The Pico in between. But
Okay.
actually, that was their first chip. And Pi4J was not compatible with Raspberry Pi 5
Well,
at that time.
I'm so like grateful that that's been
And
worked
it's been
on,
handled. And
and
it's
here
been
we go.
handled because thanks to the community, someone did this for us. Someone who was not part of the Pi4J project, a student who needed it for his master
That's
or
amazing.
his project, he just said, yeah, at some point, hey, here I am. This is how I fix it.
Awesome.
So we had some new releases of Pi4J, and one of the things was making it more compatible with the Raspberry Pi 5.
Oh, that's
And
handy. So is the new version backwards compatible as well? It can say
it's
like, oh, if
also
you're this
backwards
chip.
compatible. So
Wow.
what we have in this is the library. It's an approach with modules. So we have different modules, and you can actually see it in the POM file here. If I go to the POM file, it's a plugin architecture. So you have the Pi4J core library, and then we need a plugin to support it for the Raspberry Pi. The idea is if someone wants to port Pi4J to other boards, you have a Beagle board and you have other ones, you could do this, but no one volunteered yet to do that. And then we have a few plugins depending on the native code being used to interact with the GPIOs. So you have PyGPIO, you have Linux FS, and you have GPOD. And this is the new one. So this is the new one, which is for the Raspberry Pi 5. And then thanks to other contributors, Tom Aertsen and Robert van Berg in the Pi4J project, there is now also within these libraries a priority defined. And if they detect that you're running on a Raspberry Pi 5, then they take other priorities than other boards and older boards.
Very cool.
So it should all be handled by itself. bringing me to my first question to you, actually,
Okay.
is will we still need these? I don't remember exactly why these were added, because if we go to the configuration of Pi4J,
Yep.
so if it's initialized in the Spring Boot starter, within the Pi4J you have this board model now. So if it detects, this will return to you, it's a Raspberry Pi 5, it's a 4, it's a 0, it's a 02. We can detect that, so we return this. So if you run this starter now on a PC, on a Windows or a Mac, it doesn't recognize board, so it's an unknown board model.
Yep.
And it will use these mock providers. But let's, you have still my camera. I have this test set up for you. So let's look what we can do with this. So within the Spring Boot starter, so what this does is you have this Pi4J context.
Okay.
So this loads these plugins, puts them in the right priority, and then you have everything set up to start a project. And I've done this in this sample application. You created it, I think, some time ago, but I added some examples.
Fantastic.
So I added a service, and the service has three things. So if you look into my video now, you have this little LCD screen.
Oh, let's see if we can.
You see my camera?
I'm going to pull this up here. Oh, yep. There we go.
I replaced myself with, so you have the hello Dashon LCD screen. In the back, you see this little green LED.
Yes, I sure do.
And there is, next to it, there is a button.
Okay.
And that's what I define here in this Pi4J service as code. So you have the auto-wired context. So this comes from the Spring Boot starter.
Okay.
So it has all the dependencies. It loads the context. It loads the native code, whatever it needs. And then it configures them. I added tries around everything. I know this is not the best coding practice, but it helps me to do some debugging. And each of these examples of these components is based on example code, which is available on the Pi4J website.
Perfect.
So we have a LED, light emitting diode, which is a digital output.
Yep.
We have a button, which is a digital input. And we have an LCD screen, and actually the LCD screen is a bit more complex.
Okay.
But I'm a lazy developer, so I copy-pasted it. Because we have Pi4J is used at a Swiss university where they learn the interaction between software and hardware.
Wonderful.
And they use Java and Pi4J and Raspberry Pis. And they contributed a project where they interact with a lot of these components. And so here in this LCD class package, you have some code which is just copied from this project here. So I just copied it. Okay. It's a component. It's an LCD display is defined here. An LCD display is actually the one I'm using, connected as an I2C device. So I2C is one of the many protocols that you can use to interact with electronic components. You have digital input and output is just a pin which is low or high. But then you have I2C, you have SPI, you have PWM, you have some other protocols. I2C is a way to communicate with an electronic device. And within that LCD display, which then extends again from that I2C device, you have write display text, display line of text. So display this text online of a display. Perfect. So that's what I'm using here.
Okay.
So I think this is a good Spring practice. I have a service. And here in the service, I initialize these components. Mm-hmm. And then I have some methods So I can set the LED low or high. I can read the button state, and I can set text on the display.
Fantastic.
Okay. And I have created a REST controller. And this REST controller, this is bad coding again. This should be post
Okay,
and
this is a safe place. This is a safe place. We got to get it MVP first.
Voilà. That was my idea. This is just an example. So we can get the state of the LED and actually change it. So this should be post, but get is easier to test.
Okay.
We can get the state of the button, and we can get on a line of the display a text. And to make it even more easier to test, I have this also a REST, which just returns some plain HTML with all the links that I've added.
Perfect.
Okay. Now, let me share something else. So this is the code.
So this is the current starter example app that is in
GitHub.
the repository. That's
in GitHub. Okay. Voilà. And now let me go to, no, not exploit.
And I think that your LED button, I think the schematics for that exists on the Pi4J site as well.
Yeah. So how you wire it and all that stuff is on the website.
Wonderful.
Now, if you want to share my screen again, I switched to VNC.
Perfect.
So what you're actually seeing now is the screen behind me.
Okay.
So that you see there. And I have here the application is running. Okay, good.
Okay.
So what is this? This is a Raspberry Pi 5 with the latest Raspberry Pi operating system. So what is the Raspberry Pi operating system? That is based on Debian. So it's Linux, it's Debian. And then Raspberry Pi does some extra hocus pocus on it to make it an operating system ideal for the Raspberry Pi. That means that you can very easily configure VNC.
Fantastic.
So I have, by the way, there is a big change in VNC also for the Raspberry Pi operating system for Raspberry Pi 5 and the latest Debian. And it's not, real VNC is not compatible anymore.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
Don't ask me the details,
Yep.
but Tiger VNC is a free client which is compatible.
Yep.
That's the one I'm using.
I'm pretty sure that I've ran into those changes between
Probably, yeah.
The different versions of or the Raspberry Pi operating system. And while you're doing that, I will say that there's been some other changes to that Raspberry Pi operating system. Some of the defaults, when I'm deploying these Raspberry Pis, I'm deploying them in weird places, on plants, on trees, inside, outside. And the way that I'm delivering software is a lot of times it's with Kubernetes. And I ran it. So you mentioned the Raspberry Pi operating system, and I've mentioned it many times. And in my blog, the default kernel does not allow me to do some of the things that I need to do with Kubernetes and other things. So I've been kind of defaulting to the Ubuntu operating system. And if you're like me and you're using Ubuntu to do these things, you need to add, they have a package that is the Raspberry Pi editions. So after you install the Ubuntu operating system, you have to install this additional library. I don't remember how it's called, but they basically have some Raspberry Pi modules that make it behave similar to what you would get out of the box with the Raspberry Pi OS.
And I don't know, you have the imager here. So if you're on PC, you have this imager tool which you can download from the Raspberry Pi website. It's to prepare an SD card for Raspberry Pi. You also have different flavors of the operating system. So, of course, nowadays we go for 64-bit.
Of course.
But you also have, within that 64-bit, you have different versions. So you have versions which are backwards compatible. You have versions with or without desktop. So if you don't need the UI, like we are now using, you can do that. And you have even full and more reduced versions. What doesn't come with it is Visual Studio Code. And now on the Raspberry Pi 5, it's really powerful, and you can use it to run code, to write Java code. So, and because they added Visual Studio Code to their repository, it's just
amazing.
sudo apt-get code,
That's
and you have Visual Studio Code.
quite an improvement because you know what? This has been a long time ago, but this might be around the time where I got really excited about the Pi4J project. I spent a couple of months using the Raspberry Pi 4 as my daily driver back in like 2018 or 2019. And back then there was like a one-off project that I had to install in order to get Visual Studio Code to work on my Raspberry Pi. I don't remember the name of it. So just this alone, that's kind of a big step forward.
Yeah.
That you do have this kind of real world tools available for the Raspberry Pi 5. And the thing that I talk about a lot is around the globe, not everybody has access to the things that we have. The Raspberry Pi family of devices is a common denominator that is available everywhere in the world. Like it can be shipped anywhere. I don't think there's any restrictions that I've heard of that this can be sent, mailed. So when we're trying to help out the community and they're trying to experiment with Kubernetes or other devices and the other things that you can do, actually I'll add this part. The place where I see Raspberry Pis being used the most outside of the US is in Africa and around agriculture. They are doing amazing things with these little devices and a couple of additional sensors and monitors. And they are doing amazing things with these devices, and they're communicating with these devices in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
So it's just a great platform that's affordable, and thank you for sharing this tip.
Yeah, and so that was actually the initial idea of the Raspberry Pi. Let's build the cheapest computer that you can just connect to your television, because everyone has a television. So the very first Raspberry Pis were just with an analog output that you could plug into any television. So the idea was, let's make a very cheap computer, and people can just buy the computer alone and connect it to a television they already have. And they shifted a bit away from that idea because they're more expensive now, but still the Raspberry Pi 5 with 2 gigabytes of memory is $45 or something like
Still
that. I
super
think so.
affordable.
Around that price, yeah.
Yep. Still super affordable.
And I've written my book. It's there. I've written my book about Java on the Raspberry Pi completely on a Raspberry Pi 4.
Amazing.
So Visual Studio Code was my tool to write the programs, to try everything out, and also the tool to write the book itself, because I wrote it in with LeanPub, so it's all Git text files. So it's a perfect tool. And now that I was experimenting with this starter here, it starts fast, it runs fast, it's amazing. What I've done here, I went into the sample project. So, and this one, and this is the one I'm now running. So it is running now on my Raspberry Pi itself. Now let me switch my camera back to the display. So if I now go to localhost, come on, are we awake? Yes, we are awake. So this is this REST control which gives me
there you go.
This list of links. So within the starter, there are some extra. So this is the normal actuator that we all use, but there is an extra one, and here you probably will need to help me a bit, because this was returning info, but I think the problem I have is parsing to JSON.
Okay.
No serializer found. So I'm probably giving too much information from what Pi4J has done, which is not serializable. So we'll get into that later.
Okay.
But what you can now see, so I don't know if you look at my camera. That little green
Yep.
LED in the middle, it's now turning on and off.
Oh, that's
You
amazing.
see? It's
This
amazing.
you're a genius. We're doing this from a Spring Boot. This is just this is exactly it. This is the demo that actually failed for me. I had a blanket, which is that strip of LEDs attached directly to the GPIO, and I couldn't get my networking to work, and it was a big failure, and I was so sad.
To be honest, LED
this is it.
strips is a hard thing.
That wasn't even the hard thing. The LED strips worked.
Yeah.
The hard thing was the networking.
Okay.
You know, where it worked downstairs, and then I went upstairs, and then all of a sudden, hey, no network, and I even brought my own network, and nothing worked, and I was so flustered.
Can we try something? How many people are in the stream? I have no idea.
There's about 481.
So can I post something? So if you go to pi4j.ngrok.dev.
All right, I'm not going to do it. I'm gonna make somebody else do it. Pi4j.ngrok.dev.
Dev.
I'm gonna post that up here, and I'm going to make. We're just gonna wait awkwardly until somebody else goes to pi4j.ngrok.dev, and
see if something
they're going to
is
see the same
happening.
thing. And what we want is we want to see that light flicker on and off.
And you can also put some text on the display.
Oh, and we can put some text on the display. Please be gentle. Mom and Dad watch this. So if you're watching, say hi. Let us know where you're from. But when we're putting text on the LED, just please be nice.
I've done this at Devox. The light went out.
Yes.
I did this at Devox, and I also had a buzzer connected to it.
Things are happening.
But the buzzer was a bad idea. In a conference with 200 people.
You know what? That you say that because my friend Jonathan Ivanov, who does the observability for Spring, in his demo, he was using MIDI sounds generated through the observability. Mm-hmm. So what was happening if you got an error, a bass line would play, and if it was successful, you'd hear a high note or whatever. But he was having his observability displayed through the notes, the MIDI notes. Now we're getting all sorts of action here. The lights going on and off. This is fantastic. But the having the MIDI work during his demo was a hit. It was awesome. So maybe alternate. Next time we do it, instead of doing a buzzer, we'll see if we can get some of that MIDI output. And I know exactly where to go to find that code. That's Jonathan Ivanov's T-House repository, which is one of my favorites. So yeah, this is very, very cool. Did we get a new display? We did. We even got the displays being updated. This is all sorts of fun. And this is all of it. Yes. So the ngrok piece. Did you use the ngrok starter?
No, so ngrok is not in my application. It's just a command I start in the terminal. Yep. Ngrok was so kind to give me a free upgrade so that I have this domain name now.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So otherwise you get these random web addresses, and now I have this pi4j.ngrok.dev because I hate tunnels.
But ngrok makes it so easy. So
yeah.
I'm going to tell you this: I use this umbrella term, Spring Boot on the edge, and I'm doing interesting things. One of the things that I do is I will use Spring Boot while I'm flying. And I'll even have my Raspberry Pi hooked up to a camera with a Spring Boot app. And
I saw you on a plane when I was at a conference.
Yeah,
in Brussels.
And you hit the button, and then you get a picture. Depending on which flight you're looking at. Oh yeah, you did the one where it was on my laptop.
I had your picture.
Yep.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I can do the same thing with that Raspberry Pi device, and I can set up ngrok. Ngrok has a Spring Boot starter. So that on your system, you don't need to configure anything. It'll download the ngrok and create the tunnel and do the things. So all you're doing is plugging in your
Yeah.
API key and token
Yeah.
into the environment. So when you're doing these things, and just to double click on ngrok, I use Cloudflare D by default here, which is a similar thing, but on the plane ride, the Cloudflare D is not able to establish a connection on some of these plane rides. And ngrok can not only establish that connection, it can keep it and reestablish it when it flakes out. So I have been a big fan of ngrok, but when we're dealing with Raspberry Pis, and right, you don't want to expose a public IP address into your lab for that Raspberry Pi. So ngrok makes it really
Yeah.
nice so you can still have access to it without having to do a bunch of crazy networking.
And the amazing thing is how low this all go. I mean, so I used this system on in a DevOps conference. So there were over 200 people in the room with the Raspberry Pi 4, so an older version than this, and I had over 200 ngrok connections at some point, and you had the same kind of graph like this.
Yep.
So this is a full Spring Boot application. I didn't do any optimization. At that time, I was even using a Vaadin application, so it was providing a whole UI.
That's amazing.
On a Raspberry Pi 4, through ngrok, through the Wi-Fi of a conference, which is always a nightmare.
Yep, always a nightmare.
Except at DevOps in Belgium, they have their fiber thing.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how this works. So we have opened. I don't know if this actually the number of connections we have open, probably not the number of active users, but yeah, this is
the other
just
piece
works,
that ngrok provides is you can go to their dashboard and you can see connections and success and fail. You can see all that from their dashboard. Their dashboard has even made improvements since the last time I took a flight and did this. Their dashboard continues to get better and provide more and more information. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Let's turn it also around. So you have also this API /Pi4J/button. So it says now low. I cannot do refresh and press at the same time. It's behind me. So if I go, I roll over to my desk behind me to push the button. If you refresh it on your side, it should turn high. Let's try this.
I'm going to ngrok.dev API Pi. Oops, Pi. I was letting the audience do it.
I'm back. I don't know if you tried it, if to refresh it, but it should have turned high.
Fantastic.
And you can even see it in the output of the application, probably. So you see here.
Yeah, that's very
So
cool.
the moment I clicked on the button, it changed to high.
Yep.
And it went back to low when I released it.
And
here we see what people are putting on the LED display, LCD display.
Fantastic.
People who are interested in LED strips, as you mentioned it.
Yes.
So let me show you an example. My setup, I redecorated my whole office here, so all my experiments are in a box now.
Always. Yeah. Always. I got mine right here, the one that I haven't unpacked for my trip to Barcelona.
What I did actually, and it's not using Pi4J. It's using another library for serial communication, which is called. Sorry, I forgot the name. Doesn't matter. Let's look. Facecast J Serial Com, which is a well-known library for serial communication. Doesn't matter if it's on the PC or on the Raspberry Pi, it just works. So what is the Pixel Blaze? And that's the problem with LED strips. LED strips require a very strict timing.
Yes.
So what you do, you send a byte array with colors. The first three values are for the first LED. So it takes the three values out of the byte array and it transmits the rest of the byte array to the next LED, and so on and so on and so on. But as soon as the timing is not correct in these signals, it considers the byte array as a new one. and not as, and then you start shifting and you have very strange effects.
Yep.
Now, what I found, and this is a US product, it's called the Pixel Blaze,
Okay.
and you connect it as a serial device.
Okay.
I'm looking for the picture. So it's this little board, and it connects a serial input, and it can drive up to 8 LED strips, I think.
Fantastic.
And you just make a long byte array in Java with your colors, and the board handles all the rest.
That's amazing.
And this is described as an example here on the Pi4J website. Why? Because you already got this question, how can I control LED strips with Pi4J? The answer is not really, but you can do it with another approach, but still Java code. So it's described here. That's a bit also what we want to do with the Pi4J project. I'm a big JavaFX fan.
Yes, and I'm on my way.
Yeah.
I'm on my way.
And that's also something we have here. If you want to do user interface, that's actually how my journey in Java and Raspberry Pi started. I wanted to create a touchscreen controller for my son to control lights in his drum boot. So I wanted to do that with JavaFX. So if you want to run JavaFX on Raspberry Pi, how you do that is also described here. And the fun thing is that you can then control a LED or other components with JavaFX, just like you can do with Spring Boot and the REST API. So that's all described in the Pi4J website.
Fantastic.
But I was thinking about that error that I have here that I wanted to ask to you. And
On the
I
info.
think my problem is somewhere here.
All right, let's take a look.
So here you have the actuator info. So this adds information to the actuator endpoint.
Yep.
And I think my problem is somewhere here. So if I now remove this and I restart the application.
Okay.
First issue is always finding out. Oh, yeah. I think I now have too many applications open. Did I now stop it? Yeah. I think I had 2 instances running at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's initialized. Okay. Oh, I have too much things open. Haha, this is better.
All right.
So this is now giving some info.
Okay.
So this is the detected board with some extra info. Mm-hmm. Also the version of Java that we are running on this board and some measurements that we can do on the Raspberry Pi. So this is how many volts? I don't know what this exactly comes from. Temperature in Celsius seems to be pretty hot.
It does seem to be pretty hot.
But normally there is a case on top of it with a ventilator.
Yep.
But because I added this cable to the breadboard, yep, it's not there. I was setting this up yesterday, by the way, and I found out the Raspberry Pi 5 needs a higher voltage than most USB devices. So they also have a new power supply. And because it was still in a box, I just connected it to a lab, a power supply, which was only giving 2 or 3 amperes, and it shut down when I started Spring Boot.
Interesting. So
The voltage dropped and it just restarted. So you really need to take care with the Raspberry Pi 5 that you have the correct power supply.
so that you're doing this and we're seeing our volt value. Uh, have you done anything with the power meters? One of the other pieces that is a very interesting, great demo is I am using a reimaged Sonoff smart power meter, or it's an outlet that I use, and then I plug in my power USB power adapter into that. So I'm capturing the power being consumed by a little cluster of 4 Raspberry Pi devices, or 4 potatoes or mangoes. But the magic number for me is 4 because that's how many fit on the Legos. And I'm using the Ubiquiti. It's got a 5-port switch, so I have one in, and I have enough for 4 devices on it. But it transmits MQTT, so I can capture like, hey, here's how much power we're using. And one of the interesting things, kind of related to this, and this is just where my head goes, is like there is a difference of running these applications on top of a JVM, on top of a Raspberry Pi device, and running it as a native image. And this is where I think you and I left off in our last conversation. I created a fork. I wanted to just get a native image using the using the Pi4J starter. So I have a fork that works for one of my demos where it has all of the hints that it needs in order to make that demo work.
Yeah.
And the question here is, hey, can I run Pi4J and JavaFX on GraalVM?
But he said a second question. So yes, JavaFX was separated from JDK. So that's why we describe on the Pi4J website that you can download it separately from Gluon. Gluon has created a GraalVM to help build JavaFX native apps, because they also try to push this in the direction of iOS and Android deploying apps. So yes, but it's probably something to research. But Gluon has quite some documentation about this topic. So it's on the Gluon. So people who don't know Gluon, it's a Belgian-based company, which I'm pretty proud of as a Belgian. But they have developers, spread around the world, which is typical these days. But on their documentation, go to developer docs. Here you have a Java Gluon FX plugin. You have, you'll need to search for it, but they have some create and run native image of your application. So it's all described here.
Very good. Very good.
I'm not a big fan or a user of native applications.
Okay.
Because there's too much things to research, and that's not my focus. And of course, I work for Azul, so there are perfect runtimes I can use with JavaFX. Yes, native packaged applications need less memory and start faster, but those are not the use cases I need.
There you go.
So, but yes, it's a very nice thing to research, and you can do amazing things with. I'm convinced about that. But I do love Java and the Java runtime and the optimization that can be done when your application is running and has all the classes and can do just-in-time compilation and keep improving your code. So it's a trade-off.
Yep.
There are perfectly arguments pro and con for both. But it's not my experience. It's not my field of experience.
Yep. And it takes, like, for a normal, like, where I would spend most of my time, messing with sensors and cameras and lights, the feedback loop for a native image isn't great. Like, nobody wants to wait 2 or 4 or it wasn't that long ago. It was 45 minutes to generate a native image for my Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
So you have to optimize in different places. But for what we're doing here, once you've figured it out, typically I'm doing my development on the Raspberry Pi 4. And I have one of the nice little breadboard attachments so I can do some interesting things. But then when I'm done, I want to have that running on the $15 Raspberry Pi Zero 2. So I'll do my development, similar process to what you're doing right now. And then, yeah, later in the cycle, I will oftentimes convert it to a native image. When on the Raspberry Pi clusters behind me in the closet, everything is a native image because I'm trying to, put all sorts of workloads there. And sharing, this is a really interesting problem space, is making sure that your workloads get onto devices that have the sensors for that workload, right? But this is something that Kubernetes allows you to do. But sometimes you might want to share one of the sensors or adapters that you have on your device with multiple instances of an application, or multiple applications, different applications. These are fun problems. Not easy.
No. I was going to try to rework this code, but for one reason or another, I'm in Belgium, so I have an AZERTY keyboard, and my VNC is totally messed up, and my keyboard layout is completely wrong. But what I will do, but now live, we'll do it later. So to fix this error that I had here, so what I was trying to achieve is, if you go here in the actuator info, that you here have a list of what is known by Pi4J in its registry is all the IOs you defined. So what we defined in this example project are 3 devices which are in that registry. So there is a LED, there is a button, and there is an LCD. So Pi4J has some info about it. The LED is on this pin, and it is in that state and stuff like that. So my idea was to have that info here already in that actuator info, so that you don't need to do anything to get that done if you're using the Spring Boot starter.
All right, that seems reasonable.
So I will check out what is the JSON error that we had there.
Yes.
So that was one question which I now know how to fix it. And then I have this other question is, do we still need this? Can you remember why this was added?
I think what we were trying to get to was the board info.
I think so, because that didn't exist. So I started, and actually some people thought that was a really bad idea, but yeah, sometimes bad ideas need to be done. So this was a separate library. I how do you call it? I archived it because it's now part of the core. And actually what we have inside the core Pi4J library is a database, between brackets, of Raspberry Pi boards. So it's like this. So it's actually an enum, a relational table created by enums. And what is important here is this value. So somewhere in the file system of the Raspberry Pi operating system, you can read out a value, and that's related to the version and the model of the board. So because we can read out that value,
fantastic,
we know it's this type of board.
Okay. I think this is the path that we are going down. And So to answer the question, I don't think we need that anymore.
I don't think we need it anymore. So it's something you can just request in the code.
Yep.
It's not, and actually it, while it tries to define the type of board, if you start the application, so it's somewhere here, you can find it back. So when Pi4J gets initialized, it says this. So it tries to find out which type of board it is.
Perfect.
And here, voila. So because it's this value that it has read out, it knows it's a Model 5B. Backdraw of this is we need to update the library when a new board comes out, which doesn't happen every 6 months, so not that big of an issue. And we are not able to test everything because I have a few boards, but not all of them. It's quite a long list. And by the way, this
if we're trying to expand this to the other brands,
also should be added then at that time. This database, you can see it on this website, api.pi4j.com, which is a Vaadin website. I love Vaadin.
Oh yes,
it's JavaFX for the browser.
Yes.
So here you see all that info that is in that enum. Let me take the 5. Where is the 5? I don't have all the pictures either. So if someone is following this video and has more pictures than I found online, please send them to me. So this is all the info we know about the boards, and this is the info about the pins. So these 40 pins where you connect your devices. So like now that little LCD display is connected to these 2 pins. That's how you do in I2C.
Yep.
And the LED is connected to pin BCM22, I think. So it's this one. So this is, and by the way, this website is running on a Raspberry Pi.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. It's a Pi that we get from Finaltech, which is a Czech hosting company, and they have Raspberry Pis. So they are hosting this for us.
That is. There's another company that does that too.
Yeah, there are a few. Not that much, but not that many, but there are a few who do this. Yes, indeed. Yeah, I forgot the name. Sorry.
That is cool.
Yeah. Let me help my son who needs something for his. Okay, done. So this contains all the info. So you see, it's running on the Raspberry Pi 4, Model B. How much memory does it have? I don't think I can see it here. Of course, it's running on a very good distribution of Java. The latest one, by the way.
Fantastic. You know what? Not to switch subjects, but because I have you here, there's a streamer, and I'm gonna. It's Kademlia on Twitch. He does Minecraft. He's building a custom version of Minecraft using Java. And part of his use case is hot swapping on the JVM. So like, hey, he's making changes and he automatically deploys to the JVM and he sees his changes in his Minecraft server. Mm-hmm. And this is his development process, but it's kind of his deployment process. Like he'll go into his game server and he'll do hot fixes into his game server so it doesn't come down. But one of the pain points that he has is as he's doing this hot swapping, sometimes the garbage collection fails. He's got these long pauses, or the garbage collection is doing so much that the speed, right, the performance of the application, even while he's not making changes, the performance it slows down after a while because of this garbage collection. And by default, my answer is like, hey, have you tried any of the Zulu JVMs? And he's like, what? I haven't heard of this. And he went and looked, and because his use case is hot swap, but I heard garbage collection issues and performance. So without the hot swap, I was thinking, well, yeah, when I'm running into garbage collection, not all garbage collection is the same, and I want to have a JVM that can do some things for me. I said, hey, why don't we check this out? So what I'm asking you, the point of my question is hot swapping with Azul's JVMs. Is that a topic? Does that come up a lot?
No, it's not something. No,
It doesn't come up. Hot swapping doesn't come up a lot in my
no.
spaces, in my circles. So it's
I
an
would need.
interesting
I
use
would need to
case.
try it out. I
But
have
that's
no
something.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, yeah, you have. So Azul, we have Zulu. So I hope people know Zulu. So but Zulu is a distribution of OpenJDK. That
I think
means
anybody that's here has heard of it. Actually, I'll even ask, like, is there anybody that's watching right now that is not familiar with Azul or the Zulu JDKs? If you have not heard, like, yeah, give us something. Say, nope, not me, in the chat, and we'll see.
and then I definitely need some more documentation work because Matt, my colleague, and me are working on the documentation for Zulu and the other Azul products. So Zulu is a distribution of OpenJDK. So that means everyone can download the sources of OpenJDK and can build a runtime. What the difference, what Azul is doing and other companies is it's certified. It's tested against a long set of tests for certain systems. So we have builds for Windows, Mac, Linux, all the processors. And for clients, we even have builds for very specific processors that are not typical on the market.
Interesting.
And they are listed with SDK-MAN. So you see them here. So you can just switch between versions very easily. What you're referring to is having another garbage collector is Azul Zing, which is based on OpenJDK. So that means for the biggest part, it is the same Java runtime that you know from Zulu, from Temura, and from others.
Okay.
But we replaced a few parts. What we have in Azul Platform Prime, so the runtime is Zing, we have an extra garbage collector, which is the C4 garbage collector.
Okay.
Which is aiming to or provides garbage collector pauses which are not noticeable for your application. So that's the main idea. And we also have another compiler. And the goal here is that we have a lot of clients using this for stock trades. For instance, if they want to buy a stock at a certain price, it has to be at that price at this moment. So they don't want to stop the world garbage collector from milliseconds to seconds and then executing that command. It should happen at the time. So it is an optimized garbage collector. And I'm really curious indeed for your use case, what would be the impact? So
yes,
it's definitely something to try out.
So this is thank you. This is the answer. This is
So
what I want to.
the Zing is something to try out in that case. But Zing only exists for Linux,
Okay.
but for both x64 and ARM processors. So it should be. And actually, you're inspiring me to do some Zing experiments on the Raspberry Pi. I've not done
Here's
it
the
yet.
thing: is like, yeah, maybe we can connect the dots because what I understand is the hot swapping capability is something that's just available. If it hasn't been optimized for that, I think that's okay. If we have the right garbage collector in place, I think the garbage collector just needs to be friendly with hot swapping. So Yeah, that's worth a try, and this is the answer. And I think so. My picture, my thoughts of Azul go back. Azul was a sponsor for one of the first Java user groups that I remember having a
Mhm.
sponsor. Right, early on, Java user groups didn't always have sponsors. It was just like, hey, we go meet the library, and somebody talks, and here it is. And we didn't have sponsors with the pizza and the drinks and stuff. But the first sponsored Java user group that I remember was from Azul, and the thing that they were explaining was like, look, your heap in a typical JVM, whatever year it was, can't go past this, and ours can be
Yeah.
this big. And this was the thing, and I was like, I don't even understand what you guys are talking about. And there's a similarity here. When I think of heap, I was kind of leaning into later in my career. I would lean into Redis for the exact same reasons that you're talking about. The milliseconds matter, latency is the
Yeah.
new
Yeah.
downtime kind of thing, where we can't afford to have the extra milliseconds to go and do the net. Even though Redis has the millisecond latency
Mm.
on a read, you have to remember there's a network hop there, right? And the network hop isn't always milliseconds. So wouldn't it be nice, especially if you're just doing like a key value, right? I have a big hash map on the JVM right there that I can do these things.
Mm.
This is powerful. So this is
Yeah.
where I kind of lean in. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe that's not always the case. If I can do it right here, boy, that sure would be great because milliseconds matter.
Before I joined Azul, I was using Java for a long time, but in small companies, small applications. And then by entering Azul, it's a new world. It's people using terabytes of memory,
Terabytes.
starting applications hours before they need them to start them up and warm them up. Warm up of an application is also something which was pretty new to me. And then one of the first posts I wrote for the Azul blog is this one: what should I know about garbage collection as a Java developer? It actually took me months to write because at Azul I can talk to people who develop the garbage collectors in Java. So
Yep.
they have a lot of knowledge about this subject. And then Gil Tene, one of our bosses, he was the designer of the C4 continuously concurrent compacting collector. So that's the garbage collector which is in Zing. The amount of knowledge that these people have about how Java works, the history of the code of Java. Another post that I've written is about that you can read the Java OpenJDK code as a history book because the whole time zone history is in readable text files
Yep.
with a lot of information in the OpenJDK project.
Yep.
When did the
That's
country
amazing.
switch from
Yep.
their currency to the euro, for instance?
Yep.
It's a very amazing and wonderful lesson that you can learn there. And yeah, garbage collectors, and that there are different ones, and then ZGC, which is now also becoming better, but actually is not yet in par with the C4. So yeah, things are changing there, and with all the 6-month release cycles we have, yeah, there's a lot of new features that we get,
Yep.
like the whole switch case improvements which are happening, and all these things. But under the hood, all these existing systems also keep evolving and improving. And there's so much you can learn. And yeah, by the way, while I'm promoting Azul, let me also promote
Yeah, we're just
pi4j for
chatting.
people who don't know pi4j. So it is a website originally started by Azul, but it's really a community effort. People who are interested in evolutions in Java, please check out pi4j from time to time. Each day we have 1, 2, 3 articles. We have over 200 authors contributing content to pi4j, and it's about everything related to the GVM.
Yep.
So it's Kotlin, it's Java, it's the runtime, it's tools around it, it's IntelliJ, it's Spring, of course. So people who are interested in Java and the technology around it, 4J is also definitely your place to be. And then you also have someone who's creating a podcast there.
Yeah, podcast.
Yeah, I
That's
think you're
unique. I feel
invited
like
for one
I
very
think there's
soon.
going to be one coming up that you might want to check out.
There will be one, yes, in a few weeks, a very interesting one. And so yeah, I started doing this. Someone else started, but then it stopped for some time. I restarted it because I'm a very curious person and I want to learn. And we are in a technology where we can learn a lot. Things evolve very fast,
And there's so much.
and there's so much around it. We're also gonna record a podcast, I think, this week or next week about vector databases. I know a little bit about machine learning and LangChain 4J and ChatGPT, but what is happening specifically in vector databases is so amazing, and
Yes.
and so it's Java, yes, but it's the technology around it, and just like the things I'm doing here with the whole Raspberry Pi stuff.
Vector databases.
Yeah. So
Just my short blurb is vector databases are now just a great way to search. Right. Think of all the different ways that we've tried to implement search over all the years. Right. There's been tons of them. And now vector databases, even if you do nothing else with AI and ML, just the vector database as a tool for search is amazing.
yeah, yeah. And I've seen an amazing demo on Vox Days in Brussels. I forgot the name of the guy. Sorry, he will be in the podcast. He demonstrates vector databases with Unity 3D games
Nice.
with a Spring interface in between.
Yeah,
So it's so nice what you can do with it.
that is. That's like now I gotta take that note just to make sure I want to see it. But I'm gonna listen to it on the podcast. Hopefully, you'll
Yeah.
ask that question. You'll have them describe it on the podcast.
Um, Maybe we should go back to our Spring Boot thing.
Yes, let's circle back. This is good. All right, so
That's a question to you. What needs to happen for this code that I have
yep,
to become a Spring Boot starter that you can download? So I guess we as Pi4J, the project,
yep,
should publish it on Maven,
yeah, that'd be great.
or is that something that you or Spring Boot themselves do?
So I'll tell you my approach. There are a lot of projects that would like to exist on start.spring.io. But start.spring.io has a convention, it has some like guidance where we want to have like one way of doing certain things. It has support for other like vector databases. You can kind of select one of many. But like the connection pooling, there's only one option. Right, the Hikari is kind of the default. So they've got some guidance on here's how we want to start things. They don't want to overwhelm with options. You can imagine the Spring ecosystem is so massive that there could be millions of options to choose. So the way that I'm recommending organizations that don't exist on that menu to get the next best thing is by creating a Spring CLI catalog. So maybe I will drive at this point. And I will go like this. And I will show this off real quick. So I'm gonna show my screen. And I hope this isn't embarrassing here. I'm gonna bump it up a little bit so we can all see. The Spring CLI provides this capability to deliver catalogs. So here out of the box, we get a getting started catalog. And that catalog is just a GitHub repository that has a bunch of projects, which is great. Craig has a bunch of Spring AI projects here. and I've got my own catalog of things. But what makes this cool is I can do Spring project list, and I get a list of these are all the things that are available to me through these project catalogs. Let's see if we can make that look a little bit better. I might have to go in order to make that look better. So here, I can see I get these examples of projects that are using third-party libraries, for example. So my friend Mark, or at Oracle, I said, hey, Mark, if we want to deliver projects, we want to make it easy for Spring developers to get an example of how to use the really awesome Oracle connection pooling instead of the Hikaria one that comes out of the box. What we can do is, let's do a quick example. Let's say Spring Boot. I want to create a new project, and let's just call it Pi4J. And I want to start it from one of these projects that I saw, that I have available to me. So we're going to say, let's start with this modulus. So I'm saying, give me a new Spring Boot project, but I want to start it with that modulus. So I can go, it's going to go grab from those repositories, and now I've got a project here that has not just the dependencies in the POM, it also has like working
Source code.
Yeah. So it gives me an example code, and kind of the way that I explain it is like, hey, here's an example code that you can take, and if you're you're writing on my path to production, my juice catalog, that will pass all of the tests. You'll get a great review if you're following the conventions that are in that code.
You have 1 minute. I have to open the door. I'm right back.
Yeah, no worries. So this is what I like. I like this. It's a great way for I, to make our code available, but also easy to access. It's easy. If you're hanging around, feel free to say hi and let us know where you're joining from, because my mom and dad are watching and they love to see where everybody's joining from. So if you're in the chat, you're here, like, say hi, let us know where you're from, where you're joining from. And yeah, that's it. I was just saying, hey, I like this project because I can get code along with the dependencies, not just the dependencies. I can get code with the dependencies. So if I wanted to make the Pi4J project available to more people, I'm going to go and do this real quick. If I want to make it available to more people, what I would do is I would create one of these project catalogs that have the example code that we just looked at. And I would deliver it that way so that I could do something like this. I could say Spring Boot add Pi4J. That would be awesome. So because I don't have one of those, I'm gonna add AI, because this is a really cool feature where I can just say, hey, Spring Boot add, and I can add that cool thing to my existing project. I want to switch. I want to make it so that I have a profile that uses the Zulu JDK. I can add code to an existing project along with tests and sample code. And now my project has another module for AI here. So it's bringing in that AI code, and it repackages it, refactors the package name so it fits into the package that I had. And it brings in the tests. Hopefully there's tests, not that one. So I can add things to existing projects this way as well. So this is the route that I take. If I want to bring Pi4J to the masses, this is the route that I'll go down. And what it looks like on the back end, let me do this, is it's just a GitHub repository.
And is it a full Spring project, or is it?
It can be. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So I've made mine. They are full projects. They'll start, they'll run, the tests will pass, but they don't have to be. the other cool thing that we can do is with that same Spring CLI, we can add user created commands. So here's my catalog. This is the repository that has, everything in it, all of those examples. But I also have this commands, these user defined commands. And I think there's just one where here I'm adding extensions to a project. So I can say, hey, add those commands, add my user defined commands, because so it doesn't have to be code or a full project. I can add things. This case, it's going to update some dependencies and add a Maven extension into my .mvn directory. So you can do some really unique things with this Spring CLI, even as little as just like add the Pi4J starter to my project.
What I will do is indeed create a starter as a Maven repository, as a Maven project.
Okay.
So that you can get it from the Maven repository.
That would be
a good start. At that time, I have a Vaadin application which works, but I can remove a bunch of code if I would have a Spring Boot starter.
Yes.
So then I can rework that existing example, remove that code by implementing the starter, and then make that a CLI project.
That would be awesome.
But I think we also need the simple example I now created, not with Vaadin, for people who just want a REST API.
Yep.
So we actually need two. Simple REST API and then a Vaadin example.
I think that'd be great. And I think our friends over at Vaadin would love that too.
Yes, they do.
Right. I'm in this mindset, and this is like a career conversation where a long time I was just comfortable. Oh, I'm just going to do the API, and that's amazing. But I saw other developers putting the Vaadin on the front of their APIs, adding a little pizzazz, a UI. Of course, there's still going to be a designer either way. There's still going to be somebody that does it and takes it to the next step and makes it production ready. But just by adding a UI to the things that you're developing on the back end, even if it's just for your demo, it goes a long way. And I am convinced this is one of those things that I'm trying to tell more people. Don't make the same mistake that I did. Like, have something that you can put on top of your amazing APIs, your amazing backend development. Have something that you can put on top of it so you can show your work. Because it's hard to show how amazing your API is.
And that's a bit my idea, because all this stuff is amazing, these experiments, but being able to show that at a conference. Do I have my book? One minute, let me take something.
Okay. This works. This is what we do.
This is what I take at a conference.
Fantastic. Is that?
You know it?
Yes, I do know the curl pack. Yes.
It's amazing. It's
beautiful. That is
it has
a work of
a
art.
Raspberry Pi inside and a bunch of components which are pre-wired, so you cannot mess up the wiring. If it doesn't work, it's your software. What I didn't dare to do is take this on a plane. That's exactly how a bomb looks in a movie.
Yeah.
Someone challenged me, put a battery in there and make it count down and then go through security check.
I had a similar problem. I'm going to show you what I took on the plane. This is what I took on the plane.
Yeah.
A bag of, there's some batteries in there. There's some LoRaWAN, some Beagle boards. There's quite a few things on there. And yeah.
They don't like it.
They weren't really happy. And maybe that's why my luggage got lost in Frankfurt. We'll see.
One of my previous jobs, we did GPS measurements and mobile phone quality checks on a train in Belgium. We just went on a train with a bunch of devices with a laptop open, and people were really curious what we were doing.
I'll go ahead and get on the next car. I don't think I want to be on this one. Yeah. Totally understood. Totally understand.
Nerds and toys.
Microsoft Josh says, when will we see Pi4J in the Spring
Um,
Starter? Like, that's what we're here. That's what we're working on.
That's what we're doing, and
Yeah.
try to push this forward. Now that we are on the right track, and I know what to do and how to finish it and how to get it in CLI. But be aware, this is a true open source project, so it lives by the contributors and the time they have available. What I really like about this project is how people. So Pi4J was originally started by Robert Savage. He's a US guy. Started it at some point because nothing existed like that.
Yep.
Oracle started at some point with an implementation of GPIOs. It's still somewhere, you can find it still somewhere in the Java sources or in the Java documentation. And he thought Pi4J would not be needed. But yeah.
But here we are.
Here we are.
Still needed more than ever.
Still needed. At some point, he started on version 2, which jumped from Java 8 to 11, introduced modules. It was Miro Wegner, was one of the people involved in the design of version 2. And when I started my book, Java on Raspberry Pi, that version 2 was nearly finished. But I could not convince him at that time to do it. And then some other people joined the project. So I'm mainly there in Pi4J for the documentation, working on documentation, on examples. The real implementation was by Robert Savage. Then Robert van Berg joined. He's a Swiss guy. So we have two Roberts. We have Tom Arts, who is a retired US guy who worked for IBM or Boeing. I don't know. Anyhow, he did a lot of coding. Yeah. And as his retirement project, he took up Pi4J.
Amazing.
And creating examples. Examples, again, like this LCD display, but a lot of different sensors and ICs to have more connections available on the Raspberry Pi. Then we have that student, that Alexander, who contributed to the Pi4J code, and we have sometimes very small fixes by people we don't know, but just pass by. We have a Kotlin implementation of Pi4J by someone. Problem is, he did that, but it's a bit outdated because it depends on older versions of Pi4J. And that's how this whole project evolves. If people have time, it would be very nice if we heard from more companies that they are using it, but that's also how open source works. You don't hear a lot of where it's actually being used. But yeah, we invite people to join anyhow they can or want, or try it out, find out if documentation is missing, not correct, can be improved, whatever. And yet, check our GitHub, the link that you're sharing now.
Yep. So this is where the starter is, and
what we'll
have to do is, and I know the first thing, because it's been a while since we did this, but I know the first thing that we'll have to do is we'll have to rename. For conventions wise, we'll have to rename the starter because there are other projects that look at the conventions. So we'll fix that. But this is the project. If you're interested in helping us out, here's where it is. And this is fantastic.
You know the conventions. If you can fix that, that would be great.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, and then I can take care of pushing it to the Maven repository and creating some examples. And some blog posts and Fuji content and whatever.
So the one issue is that registry issue on the info endpoint.
Yeah, I will fix that.
Oh, you have a handle on it?
I know how to fix it. I will find it.
Yeah. Right. And are there any other issues that we should be thinking about?
No, I will remove some of that code that I think is no longer needed, where we had this check for the platform that we're running on.
Deleted code doesn't have any bugs.
Voila. The best code is the code you didn't write.
Yes.
And then we should think about extra functionality which could be needed in the starter. But I think initializing the context is the biggest part. Just having the dependency in there, all the dependencies to the plugins. I think that's the most important part.
Fantastic.
And that's already there. So if I fix the actuator, then it's ready to be used.
All right. That works. Oh, I
And
feel like I'm getting buzzed. I don't think that I'm late for anything. Let me double check.
It's 5 o'clock my time. I don't know how it's
Yeah.
yours on your side.
If I can find my calendar. Yes, I am late for something.
Okay.
This was awesome.
But
and
we know what to do
let's
next.
do it again.
So
Yeah. I've got all of this Spring Boot stuff that I would like to share more. It's not just hobby stuff. I've got customers. I got real world examples of organizations that are using these Raspberry Pi or Raspberry Pi like devices in very interesting places, and I'm gonna shoot my shot here. I have been debating for a long time on writing a book. And your book has inspired so much of my passion and my hobbies. I think I would like to ask you to maybe write a foreword for my book at some point.
with pleasure.
It's been a fun journey, and and Spring Boot just keeps on getting better, and these devices just keep on getting better, and there's a lot of really, really interesting use cases where we get to kind of combine the two.
And it's not only the boards getting better, it's the Java also getting better and smaller and more performant. So
so
it's a nice journey.
We're on a journey.
Yeah.
We're on a journey, and I'm not a writer, so it might be a really long time before this book's out. But this is what we're doing. It's been fun. So
Great
thank you
plan.
for your time. I'm gonna try and go and not get fired, and let's do this again soon.
Okay, and see you for the Fuji podcast about
know.
Java on embedded.
It's right around the corner.
Right around the corner. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
See you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.